A struggling waitress served Barron Trump without realizing who he was. Minutes later, the note he left on her check brought her to tears and changed her life forever. The diner buzzed with the rhythm of a typical weekday evening, a blend of sizzling grills, clinking plates, and murmured conversations that created a symphony of ordinary life. The kind of place where regulars knew the menu by heart and newcomers were greeted with a smile that felt like home. Outside, the neon sign flickered faintly against the crisp autumn night, its glow barely holding back the encroaching darkness of the quiet street. Emily, the waitress, moved with practiced grace through the narrow aisles, her hands balancing plates laden with comfort food as her mind juggled 1,000 thoughts. She was tired, bone-deep tired, the kind of fatigue that comes from working double shifts while worrying about rent, groceries, and her little girl's school shoes. But she wore her exhaustion like armor, her smile as much a part of her uniform as her apron. Then the doorbell chimed, a sharp, almost melodious sound that cut through the diner's ambiance. A young man stepped inside, pausing for a moment to glance around. He wasn't flashy or loud, but his presence felt deliberate, almost commanding. His tall frame and easy stride drew a few curious looks, but it was the subtle air of self-assurance that truly set him apart. Dressed simply in a black jacket, he carried himself with a quiet confidence that hinted at something beyond the ordinary. Emily noticed him immediately, not because he was particularly familiar, though there was something faintly recognizable about him, but because of the way he moved, like someone used to being watched but never needing to announce himself. He chose a seat in the corner, near the window, where the neon light danced on the glass. She grabbed a menu, adjusted her apron, and approached with a practiced smile. The glass of water shimmered under the soft glow of the diner's overhead lights as Emily placed it gently on the table. The young man, calm and composed, glanced up with a small, almost imperceptible smile. His quiet demeanor carried a weight of assurance that felt out of place in the unassuming diner. "Thank you," he said, his voice smooth, polite, yet carrying a depth that hinted at more than the simplicity of his words. Emily nodded, her curiosity piqued, but her professionalism intact. "Ready to order, or do you need a moment?" He paused, his gaze drifting to the menu, but not lingering. "What's your best dish?" The question caught her off guard, not because of the words themselves, but the tone, genuine, as if her answer truly mattered. She hesitated for a moment before responding. "The roasted turkey is a crowd favorite. Mashed potatoes, gravy, all the comfort food you can ask for." "Then I'll have that," he said with a slight nod. As she walked back to the kitchen, Emily's thoughts were uncharacteristically occupied. Who was this man? He was polite, more polite than most. He hadn't once glanced at his phone or seemed distracted. He just sat there, soaking in the world around him, like he had all the time in the world. She caught glimpses of him between her tasks. He sipped his water slowly, glanced at the walls adorned with framed photos of the diner's history, and even took a moment to nod in acknowledgement at a family seated nearby. His actions were subtle, yet there was something undeniably magnetic about the way he carried himself, like someone used to being in the spotlight, yet uninterested in it. When she returned with his food, he looked up at her with genuine gratitude. "That smells incredible," he said, his words carrying a warmth that felt oddly personal. Emily smiled, brushing off the compliment. "It's my favorite too." For the next 20 minutes, he ate in quiet contentment. He never rushed, never seemed impatient, and each time Emily came to check on him, he thanked her as though her attention were a gift. "Have you worked here long?" he asked unexpectedly, breaking the quiet rhythm of the evening. Emily blinked, startled by the personal question. "About 4 years," she answered cautiously. "It's hard work, but it keeps me going." "It shows," he said simply, his tone carrying a depth that made her pause. She couldn't remember the last time a customer had noticed, let alone acknowledged, her effort. By the time he finished his meal, Emily found herself hoping he'd linger a little longer. There was a calming presence about him, something that made the chaos of her double shift feel less suffocating. As she handed him the check, he stood and offered a final, heartfelt "thank you." Then, just like that, he was gone, his exit as quiet as his arrival. Emily returned to clear the table, noticing the check lying face down. There was nothing unusual about that, yet something made her hesitate before picking it up. Her fingers trembled slightly as she flipped it over, her eyes falling first on the neatly folded cash, and then on the note scrawled in careful handwriting. She froze, her breath hitching as her eyes scanned the words. For a moment, the bustling diner around her disappeared, leaving only the note, the tip, and the surge of emotion that rose unbidden in her chest. Emily stood frozen, the diner's familiar hum fading into the background as her eyes locked onto the note. The neatly written words seemed to shimmer on the paper, each letter carrying a weight far heavier than ink. She read the first line, then the next, and her heart began to pound. "To the woman who keeps this place running with grace, even when the world doesn't notice." Her fingers tightened around the slip of paper, her throat suddenly dry. The words on the check weren't just polite platitudes, they were deeply personal, as if the writer had somehow glimpsed the life she kept hidden behind her tired smile and perfectly balanced trays. "You remind me that strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's found in quiet persistence, in showing up every day, no matter how hard life gets. Thank you for that." A lump rose in her throat as she blinked back tears. She glanced at the folded cash tucked under the note, expecting a modest tip. But when she unfolded the bills, her breath caught. There, neatly stacked, was a sum that made her knees wobble, a $100 bill followed by another and another, until the total far surpassed anything she'd ever seen left on a table. It was more than just a generous tip. It was life-changing. Her chest tightened, and the words on the note blurred momentarily as tears welled in her eyes. Emily rarely cried, especially at work, but the flood of emotions was impossible to suppress. She thought about the overdue bills she had been juggling in her mind all night, about her daughter's worn-out sneakers that needed replacing, about the nagging ache in her back that she could never afford to properly treat. And here, in the middle of her chaotic double shift, a stranger had seen her, truly seen her, and acknowledged her struggle without even knowing her name. Her hands trembled as she read the final lines of the note. "Keep going, because what you do matters more than you know. And remember, even on the hardest days, someone out there is rooting for you." She clutched the note to her chest, feeling a strange mixture of gratitude and disbelief. Who was this man? He'd been polite, kind, and unassuming, but there was no indication during their brief interaction that he had noticed anything beyond her service. How could he have known how much she needed this? How much this gesture would mean? For a moment, she thought about chasing after him, to thank him, to tell him what his words and his generosity had done for her. But when she glanced out the window, he was already gone. The faint red glow of taillights disappearing into the night was all that remained. The diner seemed to exhale around her as the moment passed. She tucked the note and cash carefully into her apron pocket, her mind racing. Should she share this with someone? Her coworkers? Her manager? No, this moment felt too personal, too sacred. She needed a few minutes to process it before the questions started pouring in. Emily took a deep breath and stepped back into the rhythm of the diner, her steps lighter, her smile warmer. When she approached the counter to refill a coffee pot, one of her coworkers noticed the tear tracks still glistening on her cheeks. "You okay, Em?" they asked, concern etched on their face. She nodded, unable to suppress the smile tugging at her lips. "Yeah," she said, her voice soft but steady. "More than okay." Later that night, after her shift ended and the diner had quieted down, Emily sat in the break room with the note in her hands, rereading it under the harsh fluorescent lights. Each time the words hit just as hard, filling her with a renewed sense of purpose. It wasn't just about the money, though. That was certainly a blessing. It was the validation, the reminder that what she did, what she fought so hard for, mattered. As she folded the note carefully and placed it in her purse, a thought struck her. This wasn't just her story. It was something bigger, a moment of kindness that could inspire others. She decided she'd share it, not for attention or sympathy, but to show the power of a single gesture to change someone's life. Little did she know, the note on the check wouldn't just transform her night, it would spark a ripple effect far beyond the walls of the diner. As Emily walked home that night, the note tucked safely in her purse, her mind raced back through the years that had brought her to this moment. The cool night air felt lighter than usual, almost as if the weight she had been carrying for so long had eased, if only slightly. Life hadn't always been this hard. She had once dreamed of becoming an artist, spending hours sketching scenes from her small hometown, quiet forests, winding rivers, and sunsets that seemed to last forever. But those dreams had taken a back seat when real life intervened. She married young, thinking she had found her forever, but forever lasted only a few short years. Her husband left shortly after their daughter, Lily, was born, leaving Emily to pick up the pieces. At first, she'd tried to keep her art alive, sketching late into the night after putting Lily to bed. But the bills kept piling up, and creativity doesn't pay rent. She sold her sketchbooks to buy groceries, traded her easel for a second-hand crib, and swapped her dreams for double shifts at the diner. It was a hard life, but Emily had no choice. Every morning she woke up before dawn, packed Lily's school lunch, and kissed her daughter's forehead before heading to work. Her days were long, her body constantly aching, but she never let Lily see her struggle. To her little girl, Emily was a superhero, the one who made pancakes with smiley faces and told bedtime stories that always ended happily, even if real life didn't. But some nights, when Lily was asleep, the cracks would show. Emily would sit at the kitchen table, staring at a stack of unpaid bills, wondering how she'd make it through another month. She worried about the things Lily needed, new shoes, field trip fees, braces, and about the things she could never provide, like art lessons or a vacation to the beach. The weight of it all was suffocating, but giving up wasn't an option. She had to keep going, for Lily. That's why the note on the check meant so much. It wasn't just about the money, though that would help more than she could say. It was about being seen. In a world where she often felt invisible, just another waitress in an apron, another nameless face in the crowd, someone had noticed her. Not just her service, but her effort, her resilience, her humanity. And that someone wasn't just anyone. It was Barron Trump, a name she'd recognized the moment she unfolded the note. Emily sat down on her small, worn-out couch and pulled the note from her purse, reading it again in the dim light of her living room. The words echoed in her mind like a song she didn't want to end. Keep going, because what you do matters more than you know. For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to hope. Maybe there was still a chance to dream again. Maybe, just maybe, the world wasn't as cold and indifferent as it had seemed. She thought about her art, the way drawing used to make her feel alive. She hadn't touched a pencil in years, but tonight, for the first time, she wanted to. Her phone buzzed on the coffee table, snapping her out of her thoughts. It was a text from her sister, Karen, who occasionally babysat Lily. "Saw your post about the note. That's incredible. You deserve this, Em." Emily's heart swelled as she glanced at the folded piece of paper. She hadn't meant to post it, but earlier that evening, on a whim, she had shared a quick photo of the note with a caption thanking the stranger for their kindness. She thought only a few friends would see it, but already comments and likes were pouring in. People she hadn't spoken to in years were reaching out, offering support, sharing their own stories of kindness and hope. It was overwhelming but also affirming. The note wasn't just a message for her, it was a reminder for everyone who had ever felt unseen, undervalued, or forgotten. It was proof that one small act of kindness could ripple outward, touching lives in ways no one could predict. Emily folded the note carefully and placed it in a drawer by her bed. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but tonight she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: possibility. Maybe she'd pick up a sketch pad again. Maybe she'd start saving for Lily's art lessons, just as she'd once dreamed of taking herself. And maybe, just maybe, she'd find a way to show the world that kindness, no matter how small, could change everything. The next morning, Emily woke up to the sound of her phone buzzing incessantly on the nightstand. Still groggy, she reached for it, expecting a string of routine notifications. But when she unlocked the screen, her heart skipped a beat. Her post about the note had gone viral. What started as a simple thank you message had spiraled into something far bigger. Thousands of people had shared it, and the comment section was exploding with reactions. Strangers from all walks of life were chiming in, some expressing their admiration for the kindness Barron Trump had shown, others sharing their own stories of unexpected generosity. One comment read, "This just made my day. Kindness like this is rare, but it's exactly what the world needs." Another said, "Emily, you're an inspiration. Never stop doing what you do." The post caught the attention of local influencers who reshared it with captions like, "Proof that a small gesture can have a big impact and kindness wins every time." Before long, news outlets picked up the story. Headlines began popping up online. Barron Trump's note leaves waitress in tears, and a random act of kindness goes viral. The story struck a chord with people. Some focused on Emily's resilience and how she represented millions of hardworking individuals who often go unnoticed. Others highlighted Barron's humility, praising him for using his platform to spread a message of empathy without seeking the spotlight. For Emily, the attention was surreal. Her phone didn't stop buzzing, and her coworkers at the diner couldn't stop talking about it. Customers began coming in, some even requesting to sit in her section just to meet the waitress with the note. A few regulars left bigger tips than usual, smiling and saying, "You deserve it." Not all reactions were positive, of course. Some people questioned the authenticity of the story, and others turned it into a political debate. Emily tried not to focus on the negativity. The heart of the story wasn't about sides or divisions. It was about human connection, something she felt deeply and hoped others could see as well. As the post continued to spread, something unexpected happened. A few businesses and organizations reached out, offering support. A local charity that provided assistance to single mothers contacted Emily, asking if they could collaborate on a project to help women like her. Another message came from a community art center offering free art classes for her and Lily. By the end of the week, the story wasn't just about a note on a check, it had become a movement. Strangers across the country started sharing their own random acts of kindness stories, tagging them with hashtags like #kindnessripples and #notes that matter. Emily watched it all unfold with a mix of awe and gratitude. She never imagined her quiet post would inspire so many people to take action. It felt surreal, like standing at the center of a storm, but not a destructive one. This was a storm of hope, of connection, and of change. For the first time in years, Emily felt like she was part of something bigger than herself. And as the messages continued to pour in, one thing became clear. The note Barron Trump had left wasn't just for her, It was a spark that had ignited a much-needed conversation about kindness, empathy, and the power of small gestures. Barron Trump sat in his room, scrolling through his phone, the screen glowing softly in the dim light. The story about his note had reached him faster than he expected. At first, he was surprised. To him, it was a small gesture, something he didn't think twice about. But as he read the article headlines and watched the comments roll in, he realized it had become much more than that. He leaned back in his chair, reflecting on the moment that had led to all this. It wasn't premeditated. When he sat at the diner that evening, he noticed Emily's quiet determination, the way she carried herself despite what seemed like an overwhelming workload. She reminded him of someone, his late nanny, a woman who had cared for him during his childhood, with a resilience that often went unnoticed. That memory stirred something in him, and leaving the note felt natural, almost necessary. For Barron, this was never about attention or making headlines. In fact, the media frenzy made him uncomfortable. He wasn't looking for recognition. He had simply wanted to let someone know they mattered. It was something his mother had taught him early in life. That kindness wasn't just about grand gestures, but about the small, deliberate acts that could change someone's day. The phone buzzed on the desk, pulling him from his thoughts. It was a text from a friend who had just read the story. "Dude, this is everywhere. You're trending for all the right reasons." Barron smiled faintly, typing back, "It's not about me. It's about her." He closed his eyes for a moment, considering the unintended impact of his actions. If anything, he hoped it reminded people that kindness doesn't need a stage or applause. It just needs intention. As he placed his phone down, Barron made a quiet promise to himself to continue finding small ways to make a difference, not for the world to see, but because the world needed it. The buzz surrounding the story gradually began to settle, but its impact lingered, rippling far beyond the walls of the small diner. For Emily, life didn't magically transform overnight, but something fundamental had shifted. The note Barron Trump had left wasn't just an act of kindness. It became a beacon of hope, a reminder that even in the hardest moments, someone, somewhere, sees your worth. She framed the note and hung it in her modest living room, right above the small table where she often sat to budget her monthly expenses. Every time she looked at it, she was reminded not just of the generosity she had received, but of her own strength, the quiet, unyielding perseverance that had carried her through the toughest days. The ripple effect of Barron's gesture also continued to unfold. The community rallied around Emily, with local businesses and neighbors stepping forward to offer support. The art classes that had been donated for her and Lily reignited a spark she thought had long since faded. For the first time in years, Emily picked up a pencil, sketching late into the night, while Lily sat beside her, coloring with the same enthusiasm Emily remembered from her own childhood. But the greatest transformation was in the conversations the story sparked. Customers at the diner began treating Emily and the other staff with more kindness, more patience. Strangers across the country shared their own stories of gratitude and unexpected generosity, using hashtags like #KindnessRipples to show how a single act could inspire countless others. As for Barron, he remained out of the spotlight, letting the story speak for itself. He declined interview requests and avoided public comment, believing that his role wasn't to bask in the attention, but to quietly encourage others to do the same. His simple message, "Kindness doesn't need applause," became a mantra for many who followed the story. In the end, the note wasn't just a message on a check. It became a symbol, a reminder that no matter how divided or busy the world might seem, small acts of kindness have the power to bridge gaps, heal wounds, and bring light to even the darkest days. Emily's story wasn't just hers anymore. It belonged to everyone who believed in the transformative power of compassion.